So it's an inaction problem because of the preconceived notion that estate planning is one, expensive, two, mostly only for rich people, three, too complicated.
Welcome. This is John Martinka, and Jermaine E is my special guest today on the Getting the Deal Done podcast. And the deal we're going to talk about today has to do with estate planning and his estate planning app. And the name of his company is Heir Light, Heir as in Heir, as in the people who are going to inherit when the rest of us are not around. So, Jermaine, it's great to have you on and talk a little bit about your entrepreneur journey and what your app is doing.
Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this point.
I've been an entrepreneur as long as I can remember. It started off when I was about 11 years old. I used to do mixtapes. This was back when we had cassettes,
Yeah.
and I would, just kind of DJ a cassette. I would package it and I would sell it in school and get into trouble. But that's when I realized that I didn't like to do things by the books, so to speak.
Okay. And where did
Yeah,
that take
and
you over the years?
yeah, so I went to USC down here in Los Angeles, and while I was at USC, it was a time where everybody started businesses. At least in my little bubble of USC. So it was a time where, Riot Games was started, this famous games called League of Legends, and then Snapchat was coming up, and it was all very tech heavy. And so, when what you surround yourself with is kind of how you measure yourself, right? And I ended up doing the same. So I started a ad trading platform at the beginning. At least that's what I set out to do. It failed, and then it went into AR ads, augmented reality ads, and then it did okay, and it turned into an agency business. And about 2016, 17, I decided to go into politics for a brief stint, mostly actually from a conversation of a mutual friend we have, uh, because I realized that the world lacked empathy at the time. And this is right around the 2016, 17, 16 election. And so I wanted to go understand how things are being done in the back end. And I got myself involved with the Treasurer of California. And so I joined this campaign. I went to meetings. I sat in rooms where, political decisions, at least the campaigning side of things, were made. And so I learned a lot about the world and how the world functioned. And then from there, I moved to New York City. I had met a woman who was at the time the best mental mathematician in the world, and she held a bunch of records and actually still do today. And we developed a curriculum to help kids build their frontal cortex. Essentially, the to boil it down in simple terms, kids age 4 to 6, if you're able to train their brain with tactile, audio, and visual, you're able to develop their frontal cortex, which in turns helps them focus better and have better executive function of their body. And so that was a startup that I built all throughout COVID. And COVID was a bit rough for us. We were a physical location business. We had
Yeah.
4 locations going on, sorry, 3 locations ramping up to 5 at the time and negotiating the sixth and seventh real estate deal. And so COVID was a bit rough for us. The company lives on. The asset is now serving in a different form factor. So I would say that's pretty good still. And then I just did some executive search here and there, played around the private equity and venture capital world, and one thing led to another. I'm building Airlight today, which I would generally say it's the business that encapsulates everything that it is about me, things that I care about, things that I want to build, and so it's been really fun.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about the app.
Yeah. So before I tell you about the app, though, I want to go back to the insight that helped me start
Okay.
the app. So during COVID, my parents and I, we started spending a lot of time sitting next to each other, co-working because we all worked online. And it made me think a lot about, why can't life be like this? Why can't we design our life around doing the things we love and spending the time with people that we love? And so, as a result of that, we worked in a co-working space, in a WeWork co-working space down here in Pasadena, and we were neighbors in the office. We're right across from each other, so
Okay.
we got to see each other a lot. We worked on our individual businesses, and we had lunch together all the time. And one of this lunch that we had was a Thai restaurant right down the street from our office. And my mom and I started talking about retirement. And what I realized was that retirement for her, at least the anxiety around retirement, wasn't because she didn't have enough. It's because she didn't have a place where she clearly saw what she had. So she didn't know how the 401k, how, everything that she had accumulated translated to the rest of her life. And so, as a tech-savvy son who loves his mother, I built a AI chatbot for her. And this AI chatbot asked her questions such as, "Who were you before you were my mother? What were your hobbies when you were 18 years old?" Things that we don't typically talk about to our with our family, with people that we love the most. I built this chatbot to ask her, and about 4 months in, I realized that if I had her assets and her relationships, the people that she cared about the most, and the things that she cared about the most, I was able to organize that into a legal form, which is essentially what a will is. And so that's how Airlight started.
Okay. So give us a little insights. You can organize money and goals and thoughts, and
Yeah,
what
yeah,
happens then?
I think what we have out there, if you think about someone thinking about estate planning, which only happens in a few situations, there's a death near them. So either their friend, coworker, their parents of coworkers, death, someone hospitalized, someone got a new child, a new home, switching jobs, switching careers. These are the times where people think a little bit about estate planning. And what ends up happening for most people is that they put it off, right? So it's an inaction problem because of the preconceived notion that estate planning is one, expensive, two, mostly only for rich people, three, too complicated. Even if they know it's important, it's just too much. I don't want to think about it right now. And so, writing on that thesis of this inaction, we built an app that essentially have a conversation with our users, and while we're having this conversation with our users, we prompt them to talk about things that matter to them, as well as in the process name things like their executor, who's the person that would carry out the will for somebody. And typically, when we have all the important people and things in someone's life, the process of organizing this information into a will that is specific to your state is not a stretch. So the mechanics of it a little bit is the conversation turns into a database, turns into a lawyer reviewed template at the back end, and that's how the app functions.
Okay. And then what happens when they have all this together?
Yeah, and then they export, and then we give them the signing instructions. So depending on state, coming into this process, I realized that do having a will or having an estate plan isn't so much having resources. It's kind of just like breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. So every state has kind of a different thing about how do you make a will valid. So some states want two witnesses. For example, in California, some states want notary, and some states will not take remote notary, only in-person notary. And so we give the user the instruction based on the state that they live in. And if they follow through with everything, we're now building out social features for them to share this estate plan with the people that they care about, with triggers that would prompt them to release the estate plan to their family, for example, when something does happen.
Okay. So they are ending up with everything that needs to be a will.
Yes. In fact, a little bit more. So, a will, a healthcare directive, which is a document that
Yeah.
tells people what to do with your body if you cannot make decisions about your health when you're still alive,
Yeah.
as well as a durable power of attorney, which is essentially, the example I like to say is if I'm out of town I don't have kids yet, but if I'm out of town on base camp Everest for 7 days hiking, and my kids need something that's very urgent, who gets to access my bank account to help them out? Right? Simple as that. So we give you three documents. We think it's the stepping stone into estate planning. Uh, Understanding a little bit of your audience here, perhaps a lot of people need a trust. Most likely, if you have a home and you understand the difference between a will and a trust, you should probably just dig into what does a trust do for you. But what we realize is that 70% of Americans don't have an estate plan, right? So there's a lot of people out there for whatever reason, inaction, lack of resource access, whatever that is. We want to get people from 0 to 1, and that's what we're going for.
Okay. So who's your target market?
Yeah, this is a question that we're still wrestling with. We have right now we're going to 30 years old to 50 years old, first time new homeowner, first time parent. We're going towards these folks because there's a little bit of an urgency. But we have users who are physicians at 60 years old. And what this physician told me, paid user, is I don't want to talk to a human. It's maybe it's an ego thing, but I don't want to talk to a human. So they used our app and got their will done.
Okay. But for the most part, you're not targeting those with a complicated estate
We're
and
not
looking for
targeting
tax
that.
avoidance and tax deferral, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that look, having a will solves the problem after, someone is here.
Right.
It's like while you're alive, a lot of things you don't really think about it, people avoid it. So the short answer is no. We don't having a will, still gets you have to still go through the probate process, which in most states is annoying. Um, but it sure beats not having one, right?
Yeah. Okay. But I just want to clarify that, for someone with an estate tax issue, and I'm here in Washington, which has the lowest threshold for when they charge estate taxes, versus the federal, which is 15 million, and if with a marital deduction is 30 million for a husband and wife. And
Yeah, yeah. So, I think a lot of it, there's obviously a lot of tax strategies, when it's a step up basis and things like that. But we're really talking to kind of the average Joe who, like me before, estate planning isn't legal to me in my head. It's just, I don't want to think about it. I just don't want to, I don't want to disrupt my day to think about death. And so we're trying to shift this conversation from depth to clarity. We think if you just take an easy step to get this process done, that you would gain this clarity about where you are in your life right now. And having this clarity helps you also to plan ahead, to live a little bit more with more groundedness. At least that's where we're starting right now.
well, it sounds that besides you, it was your mother who's a different generation, and uh, from what you were saying, was confused about the whole everything going on with retirement and estate planning, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom's a simple woman. She's an immigrant to this country, loves this country. She works and saves every dollar, every penny. She's still when until her death 7 months ago, not too long ago, she still didn't know how to spend money. Like she didn't know how to enjoy whatever she saved up. And it hurts me to still think about it, right? Like the last 5 years of her life, she essentially worked for me because she had accumulated all these things and just handed it off to her four kids. And it was in my, like, as a oldest son, I just wanted to give my mom something to help her see that, hey mom, you've probably made the last dollar that you need in your life, and maybe let's shift gears a little bit, and if you can see what you have clearly now. I was trying to explain to her, how do you spend the yield and save the principal, and what does retirement look like. And I was just trying to show her this process, and unfortunately she never got to use Airlight. But But in this chatbot, the initial chatbot that I built for her, it told me a lot about her. And one of the things that it told me about her was that she really wanted to go to Salzburg. It was like a bucket list for her as a child. And and we knew that she loved this movie called The Sound of Music, but we didn't know how much she loved it. So the chatbot told us that, and July last year we took her to Salzburg. We flew over to Austria. We took a car out there, and as we're walking around Salzburg, she kind of looked up to my dad, my girlfriend, and I, and said, "The little girl from Malaysia could not have imagined in her lifetime that she would end up in the place where Maria from The Sound of Music got married." And and I think about Airlight in this terms of like, I'm just grateful for me being curious to build this app, and that led me to, have this memory with my mom. We did a few more things along those lines, and 7 days after that Salzburg trip, she was hospitalized, and shortly, like a week after, she passed. And so we didn't go on this Salzburg trip thinking she was going to die. But because we were having these conversations, it uncovered some of these things that are important to her. And so for me, Airlight, when I met what I said about Airlight is like everything that led up to what I'm building today as an entrepreneur, as a business curious guy. That's what I meant. Like, I'm just super grateful that Airlight has already made its impact on my life, and now I'm trying to just push it out there for more people.
So what I'm hearing from that, Jermaine, is that it's not just a tangible of getting on a step by step to get a will, but it's also the intangible, the emotional that, like, just like you experienced with your mother.
It is clarity is love in practical form.
Okay. So you're on this journey that you've been on now for less than a year with Airlight. What have been some of the obstacles that you've faced and overcome? What are some of the we'll call it the benefits or positives that you've gone through, besides the intangible of what you just discussed?
Well, it's a very exciting time to build businesses, right? We have AI basically upending and challenging a lot of the things that we do. How quickly can we ship a new feature? But what I realize with a product that is so human, that the design, the UI, the interface, as well as the experience design matters more than ever. Because we're telling someone in a very short period of time to trust us with their most important information, right? Their most precious memories, essentially. We're telling someone to trust us. And no amount of AI wordsmith,
Yeah.
generating can do that. And so we're kind of living in between, I would say in the forefront of like, what does it mean to build a product for tomorrow with the tools that we have and yet still be so human in the process. And it's been rewarding and very challenging.
Okay. So, uh, you talked about AI and everything else and the tech going into this. What about security of information?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest things. One of the things that we started. My engineer on our AI side of it, prior to joining the team, he was an authentication engineer for a Nasdaq listed app with, I want to say, like 200 million users. And so authentication, data protection, and things like that is at the forefront of everything. I would say in our priority in terms of cybersecurity and things like that is, number one, we need to make sure the links between our apps, our APIs, so to speak, are very secure. Number two, we can't give legal advice. Right. This is how LegalZoom and companies like that get into trouble. There's no legal interpretation. There's no legal advice. So it actually makes my app a little bit boring in the sense of like, I can't tell you stories. The app cannot tell the user stories. The user can tell the app stories, and we can't tell you what to make of the story you tell us. And
Yeah.
so kind of two sides of it. And yeah, so to answer your question though, we are I think, split between AWS and another database service. And we think about this all the time. The worst thing that can happen to our reputation is a data breach. And
Hmm.
so we work on it all the time.
Okay. Well, it's been a fascinating discussion. It's not our typical discussion on this podcast, but it is, the entrepreneurial journey, but it's something that is important to everybody. Everybody has a family. Everybody wants to take care of things that the best they can, and yet, as you have found out, there's through your family, there's just a lot of lack of knowledge about what to do, and that creates some anxiety at times. So Jermaine, fascinating journey. You're a serial entrepreneur. Uh, what do you do when you're not creating apps and businesses and all that?
Oh, John, glad you asked because yeah, we met through this business context, but we have another link, which is Rotary. And I met my partner. She's Ukrainian. So I met my partner 4 years ago when the start of the full-scale invasion during humanitarian work. And she was sitting next to me on stage at a Rotary conference talking about humanitarian efforts for Ukraine. And so since we started dating about 3 years ago, we've been to 27 countries together. You know, it's my goal to travel as many places that are difficult to travel to when you have young kids, because we want to get that checked out. So we've done India, we've done Nepal. We're gonna probably do Brazil soon. You know, we did Bali last year. So that's the journey I'm on. I'm trying to live as much as I possibly can without being bankrupt, really.
So, okay, so what you do when you're not working is Rotary service and traveling.
That's basically it. I would say more traveling these days, a little bit less rotary now.
Yeah, and as we've talked, we have a good mutual friend, very good mutual friend who uh, we both know through Rotary. So, okay, final thoughts. Anything I should have asked you? Any things you'd like to get out to the audience? And then, how do people get hold of you?
Yeah, you can. I'm pretty easily found. You know, I have a unique combination of a name, Jermaine E. I'm named after Jermaine Jackson of the Jackson Five, and my last name is just two E's. So you can find me anywhere. I'm one of one. I'm pretty sure. Uh, I think a parting note for us in this context, I want to just share with you like how cool and grateful I am to have joined Rotary at 23, because I was sitting in a room of folks who have gone through life and talked to me about the things that truly mattered at the end of it, or at the last chapter for many. I was in a club of 800 members, and so, as we kind of look back at the way we spend our time, I would encourage people to challenge this thought that we often say, which is life is short, time flies. That's actually not true. What is true is that we kind of forget a lot of the details. So I would say if you're listening to this, you make it all the way through the end, I challenge you to write down the last 10 things that you did that made you smile, and maybe do more of that. You know, just kind of refocus and realign a little bit, because the world is kind of noisy right now, right? It's easy to get distracted.
Yeah, more than ever with the speed of information. Yeah. Okay, and what is the website for Airlight?
Airlight is at HEIRLIGHT.com.
Okay.
We're rolling out all 50 states right now. I think we're rolling out two states today. So
Ah, cool.
depending on when you're listening to this, I hope we get to Washington and beyond. So feel free to try it out. I'd love to hear your feedback.
Okay. So again, this is the Getting the Deal Done podcast, and my special guest Jermaine E with Airlight. It's been a interesting discussion. Uh, I thank you for being on, and I wish you all the best with your new business and your travels and your Rotary work. Thank you, Jermaine.